Welcome to Season 2 of the Simply Dynamic podcast. I'm Jennifer Maiden, co-creator and executive producer of this podcast, and the Assistant Dean of Graduate Studies at Rowan University's Rohr College of Business. Today, I invite you to join our hosts, Joe Devine and Christina Renna, for a discussion with Dr. Matthew Edson, who is the founding dean of the Shreiber School of Veterinary Medicine here at Rowan University.
Good morning, Dr. Edson. How are you? You are our first guest of our rebranded Simply Dynamic podcast.
I didn't know I was first. That's
yes.
Great.
We're excited to have you.
We're honored to have you here today and to talk about your leadership experience, your career, and then ultimately, what you're doing in your profession now with the School of Veterinary Medicine at Rowan University. So why don't we start there and a little bit about why did you decide to become a vet?
Well, I grew up around animals. I always had a love for animals. And then I became a paramedic. So I thought maybe I was going into human medicine. And after a couple years being a paramedic, I think I decided sick cows were more my style. And instead of going to medical school, I went off to veterinary school. And I've been pretty happy with that choice so far.
That's great. And did you work in the profession in a practice first, or did you go right into the bigger animals, the larger animals?
Yeah, I was one of the rare students who didn't grow up as a kennel attendant or work in a small animal practice. I grew up on a farm. We had dairy goats. We had horses. My first job was a cow milker at a 500 cow dairy. So I think the ag side I had, but I never really got involved in the small animal world until after graduation. So a little bit of a non-traditional path. Almost everybody grows up in a vet clinic somewhere, and that wasn't me.
Yeah, see, that's unique for me. I didn't know that. Did you, Christina?
No, I didn't. But given the background in agriculture, I mean, you're certainly in the right part of the state for this school to be coming, and given how agriculture the region is generally speaking. So
I miss the agriculture. I think that's shrinking in New Jersey, but it has kind of moved to the south. So it's nice. I'm from Burlington County where the farms are disappearing. So I get to drive down to Glassboro where they still exist. So that's been nostalgic.
I grew up in Cumberland County. Got to go there. Got to go to Salem County. Still plenty of space and plenty of land.
Yep. We're looking forward to serving that population with this school.
Let's talk a little bit about the school. It's so exciting. It's, a highlight. It's on the tip of everyone's tongues in South Jersey, what Rowan University is doing. So what brought you here?
Well, I guess at its core, I was a New Jersey guy who had to leave the state to go to vet school. And I was pretty happy in Kansas. It was a great time. It was a great program. But I would have liked to have been able to be here at home and do my education here. So I think when the opportunity came up for someone to move a program forward, I was all on board to help however I could. So I started out as a consultant. I think that was probably a year and a half or so of just doing feasibility study. And then they asked me to come and lead the program. So, hey, I didn't want to be an academic. I was pretty happy being a veterinarian in clinical practice, but the opportunity to bring this to our state was too good to pass up. So here I am.
So you're not in Kansas anymore, sort of like Dorothy, right?
I'm not. I'm back in Jersey, and there's a lot I miss
great
about
to have
Kansas,
you, right?
But man, I'm a beach guy, and I couldn't get much farther away from the beach.
Yeah, that's pretty far
Kansas,
away, no doubt. What's the current state of veterinary medicine in the United States? Is there a big need, a demand? What's going on?
We could talk about that for hours,
okay.
I think. I think there's right now a pretty major shortage, and a lot of that has to do with just not making enough vets, people leaving our field, maybe not giving people the work-life satisfaction that we should, just given the demands of this profession. Mm-hmm. So I think we have a lot of things on the horizon, whether it be people leaving the profession, not replacing them fast enough, or pet owners just growing in numbers and the demand for care growing that's becoming a little bit overwhelming for all of us. So it's a great job. I don't want to make it sound like I don't love it, and most of us do, but it is a challenging field to be in, especially given the degree of work we all have right now.
And this is animals of really, we think of vets, we're thinking of our dogs and our cats primarily, but this school is not just dogs and cats.
Neither is veterinary medicine.
Sure.
And I think that's easy to forget, that we all deal with food safety issues and zoonotic diseases.
Absolutely.
Things like COVID pandemics, right? All of these things, oftentimes, these are diseases that come from animals that end up in humans. So vets are on the forefront of public health, whether it's food safety, disease control, all the way down to things like spaying your cat or dog. But I think we're suffering a lot in other areas, and making sure that vets know that they can do things other than small animal practice. Be a horse vet, be a cow vet, go work on elephants in Thailand. There's unlimited opportunity in this field.
Does that require different training?
Well, I like to frame it by saying that we have to know all of the anatomy, physiology, and everything about every species that's not human, right? So it presents its own set of challenges because every single thing is a little different. I will say that doesn't mean we spend as much time on fish anatomy as we do on dogs and cats, right?
Sure.
We focus on the major species, but you have to know everything when you come out to pass a national licensing exam that includes everything that's not a person.
Wow.
And is that why you think that there is a little bit of a trend away from the profession? Just because you're referring to the demand, how demanding the career is. Do you think that's a part of it?
I think a lot of us like that challenge. I mean, it's pretty cool to see all these different things and compare them, right? And in all those academic senses and clinical senses. So I don't think that's scaring anybody away. I think there's a lot of other social reasons that make this a challenging field, but that part I find interesting. I think most other vets and vet students do too.
So we alluded to a little bit earlier the bigger animals that need care. What's the state of that in South Jersey? Are there people taking care of those animals now? They have to bring somebody in. What will that mean for your development with the school?
That's a big issue nationally, and I think that maybe the salaries haven't kept pace. So if you graduate and you have, $300,000 worth of student loans, which is not uncommon in vet med, you're probably going to go where they're paying you big money to work in a heated and air-conditioned office 4 days a week seeing cats and dogs. Us folks who are in the large animal world are out in a pickup truck all hours of the night doing surgery in a barn when it's 25 degrees. So, economically, I'm not sure that there's a lot of interest in doing that and getting paid less than if you're in the heated and air-conditioned office 4 days a week, right? So that's been a challenge for us to recruit people into that field. The other problem becomes just like, I'm a farm kid. I grew up in Burlington County on a farm, right? How many more farm kids are left in Burlington County? So if you didn't grow up milking cows, you probably don't want to be a cow vet. It's a lot harder to get folks out of the city to determine they want to do those jobs. So I think there's some selection pressure there that's a challenge for us. The school as a whole, we would like to try to help that. We do have an ambulatory service that goes out to serve farm animals and horses right now. So there's 2 doctors already. They started about a month ago. So we're trying to address that as best we can. Everywhere south of Burlington County will serve from Rowan. So it's not going to fix the entire southern part of the state's problems, but we are giving access to services that weren't available before.
Sure. Something is better than nothing. That is
absolutely.
That's for sure. So do you want to switch gears a little bit and talk specifically about the school?
Sure.
Where is it going to be located? How many students are you looking to bring in?
So the school is under construction. It's over across from the Inspira Hospital on our west campus here in Glassboro. We have, I think, one half of one corner of one wall up right now. So
hey, that's
really
a start.
excited.
That's a start. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, things are trucking along. So that's going to be our primary location for our new clinical facilities. We'll have a teaching hospital there, mostly small animals, so cats and dogs and household pets. We'll have all our classroom space. And then there's a 50,000 square foot translational biomedical research tower as part of that too.
Wow.
So this is going to be a resource we don't have in Gloucester County. We don't have in South Jersey. We're talking not just general practice care, but surgery, radiology, oncology, emergency critical care services. So this is going to be a pretty great referral resource for surrounding vets and people who didn't have access to that. And we'll use that caseload to train all of our new veterinary students.
Where's the closest school to this school that someone could go and get this kind of education?
We're not too far from the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, but there's only 33 vet schools in the entire country. So while we're kind of close to one, we are not really flush with vet schools.
Were you embraced by them when this announcement came out about, because obviously there's a limited number of seats, but at the same time, sometimes organizations don't like to say, well, there's going to be a competitor in the market.
Well, I think our reason for doing this was to provide access and affordability to New Jersey residents who had no in-state option, right? And I think in the veterinary world, we have so many applicants. I mean, there are oftentimes thousands of applicants for maybe an average of 100 seats in a program. So there is some competition just by nature, but there's plenty of very well-qualified students. And for us, this was less about competition and more about giving New Jersey residents access to in-state tuition where they've never had that before. So we're happy to bring that to them here at home, and we're happy to work with all our neighbors in any other vet school to achieve that.
How many students again will be in that first class?
We'll have 70 students in the first class.
In medical schools, how many years? 4?
Yes. So 4 years after a bachelor's degree, and then first class 70, second will be 80, then we'll go up to 90, and we'll stick it.
Well, that's exciting.
So projects like this, schools like this, they don't come about without some sort of startup funding mechanism. Do you want to talk a little bit about how the school came to be?
Yeah, it's pretty expensive, it turns out, to build a vet
Go
school.
figure.
So we were very lucky to have a great degree of support from the state of New Jersey. So we had $75 million dedicated to us just for capital improvements, and then some money added to that after. We're getting a appropriation from the state every year to help support our development. If it wasn't for that, this would not be feasible. I mean, it's very costly. We're not doing this because it's profitable, right? We're doing this for the access. So we really appreciate the degree of support we've had from New Jersey. And without that, we would not be here today.
You also had a donor, right?
We do. Yeah, we have a wonderful donor. We actually have a lot of donors. So I don't want to exclude any of the other donors, but we have a naming donor, Jerry Shreiber from J&J Snack Foods. He donated $30 million.
Wow.
And we're hoping to use that primarily, if not exclusively, for scholarships. So when that's fully funded, the amount of scholarship revenue that'll produce every year as an endowment in perpetuity is really going to help us decrease the cost of attendance for students.
That's
fantastic.
great. Will a clinical practice develop out of this eventually?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We have a whole teaching hospital here, about 50,000 square feet. I mentioned the equine large animal that's already in the works now. And then we also have shelter medicine community outreach. So we're trying to go into underserved communities and help and provide service to those who couldn't otherwise have access to that. We started that in Camden. I think we have some plans in Glassboro coming up. So we'll start those smaller clinical practices. And then once this hospital's built, we'll have all the specialties, general practice, emergency, 24-hour critical care in the teaching hospital here in Glassboro.
Well, that's wonderful.
That's wonderful.
Because the only place for accessibility to that now is Penn, and you have to drive over there to get it. So I'm sorry, Christina, go ahead.
The invisible barrier, right?
Yeah,
The bridge that no one wants to cross.
Absolutely. Listen, we don't travel well in South Jersey. We just don't. If we got to cross a bridge, it's a whole nother story. So having this in our backyard is really fantastic. So if I'm listening to this podcast and I'm thinking to myself, I never really considered veterinary school. If I decide to pursue this path, I graduate, what am I looking at? Salary-wise, career-wise, what does someone who succeeds in this program, what does it look like on the back end?
Depends what you do, right? I mean, there's certain specialties that pay hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and then you could be an intern for $40,000 a year somewhere, right? So post-graduation, we don't have to do internships and residencies.
Okay.
We don't have to specialize. You can go into general practice post-graduation. We have a lot of people who do say, hey, I want to be a surgeon or a radiologist. They'll do an internship. They'll do 3 years of residency. Those don't always pay particularly well, but then your employment prospects are better post-residency, right?
Yeah.
I will say that over the past maybe 4 years, the COVID domain really upped salaries because competition for veterinarians and the need for veterinarians went up dramatically. We're probably now in the low hundreds for a starting salary, where 10 years ago we might have been in the $70,000 or $80,000 range.
Wow.
So we have had some upward mobility with that. Go own a practice. You make a whole lot more, right? We need entrepreneurial vet students out there too.
Sure.
There's people who do consulting work. There's people who work for the Army, and the Army will pay you to go to vet school, and you come out and spend a few years in the Army and then go into practice debt-free. So there's all sorts of ways that you can slice that. But lucky for us, salaries have been on the upswing recently.
So I want to clarify a few points you spoke about earlier. Number one is that you're going to have a clinical practice, but your intention is not to compete with the private sector clinical practice. But there seems to be a large contingent of private clinical practice now becoming corporatized. The corporatization of veterinary medicine, sort of like human medicine. How is that impacting the industry, and how do you think that will ultimately impact the future of veterinary medicing?
That's another.
You could be
topic.
honest, of course.
That's another topic for an entire podcast or an entire year of
Sure.
podcasts, probably. Yeah. I think corporates want vet practices because they're profitable, right?
Sure.
So for me, this is a reason to tell students you should start a vet practice. The risk and the work is worth that reward. However, it's changed the scene quite a bit because it's not one doctor hanging out a shingle. Now it's a corporate entity that has other priorities other than just vet care, right? They have to be profitable. So I think there is a pretty significant change in the corporate direction in our industry. I'm a private practice owner outside of here. I still own my private practice, and I don't want to be corporate, and that's kind of not my world. But I can see the allure when someone wants to write a really big check and you're ready to retire. I will say it's changed things for the clients a bit too, because as you come in as a corporate entity, you're going to make changes. You want to be profitable. You want to, streamline systems that have existed for years. So oftentimes the clients may see a difference in the service they're getting or the way that that's delivered. Mm-hmm. It's not all bad, right? Corporates have economies of scale. Corporates might have access to great benefits that a small business can't have. They've got support resources that a small business wouldn't have. So I think there's some pros to that. Mm-hmm. There's some cons to it too. I mean, again, as a private entity owner, I have some worries about the overall direction of corporatization, but we have to see it in both the pros and the cons.
Yeah, we've seen that in traditional medicine as well, as you know. So it's a transformation that's happening, and it's for a lot of reasons, even from a quality of life standpoint.
Right.
The days of the veterinary medicine physician or the normal physician working 100 hours a week is no longer the norm. People want to have quality of life, and probably for the better. But I guess the question is how they balance it all, and especially these, because you said just hanging in your own shingle and opening a private practice is not easy to do.
It's a lot of work, and that's what I did. I got my dog in a pickup truck and a box of drugs, and off I went seeing horses and cows in the field.
Wow.
I did that for years on call 24/7. When I met my wife, if she wasn't coming on emergencies with me after hours, we never had a chance for a date. So I've been through that, and I can understand why people probably don't want to do that, because I'm glad I don't have to.
So getting back to that, corporate side of it, you feel like your vet is an extension of your family. Right. And so I can see that push and pull between going corporate, being privatized versus and maybe families and folks not feeling comfortable with that route. It really is a very interesting dynamic in the field. But to your point, lots of upsides too. And you led with the demands in the industry. And so a lot of the things you're talking about hopefully will shift those trends away. This could go either way, I feel like.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess time will tell. It's going to be an evolution. How did you decide to become a leader in this field?
Oh, I don't know if that was an active decision or I just sort of ended up in that spot.
Mm-hmm. That's sometimes how the best leaders come
that
about.
doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, by the way.
That also wasn't in my life plans, but I think from an early career stage, I would say, I looked at our national and even state associations, and at the time it was a lot of what I kind of termed the sea of gray at that point, right? A lot of old white dudes who just were ready to retire, making decisions for the rest of the profession for things that we all had to do as new grads for the next 40 or 50 years. So I got a little more involved. Probably more involved than most people that are a new grad. And I started applying for some committees with AVMA, and shockingly they picked me, and I started to get involved in active participation in organized veterinary medicine. And I really liked that. Mm-hmm. And I felt like more of us should do that, because I felt like more people who were going to have to suffer the consequences of those decisions should be making them, right? Mm-hmm. So I became the president of the State Veterinary Medical Association over time and got really involved in a lot of local work, and started doing some international work and just these things that I felt like were important for the profession as a whole. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really do it because I wanted to be a leader. I just did it because I thought it would help to affect the direction of what I had to do for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm. State meaning where?
New Jersey.
Okay, so it was New Jersey, because you worked in Kansas for a while, but I was just...
No, I left. I graduated
school.
And I came right back home. I started a business. I made my LLC on the internet while I was on an equine surgery rotation in a conference room. I was ready to come home and rock and roll. So I had a plan to come start a practice when I got back. So I was back in Jersey as soon as I graduated.
Who were some of your role models that, not just to become a vet, but in life, that kind of said, this is what you should do?
I don't know that anyone ever told me what I should do. And I think some of the better role models were the ones that let me pick my own path.
Sure.
Mentors come in all shapes and sizes. And I think that the education community, for what it's worth, and this is a whole nother conversation, they don't realize the impact that they have on doctors, nurses, or people, that work at ShopRite that bag groceries. Everyone has a story about someone who influenced their journey, whether it is getting them outside their comfort zone or respecting that they're not comfortable and encouraging them to go in other directions. This is all a part of why education is so important. And it's so interesting to me to hear all about your career journey and path. And now you're ending up in this education space yourself, which, as you said, was never a space you ever thought you would see yourself in.
Yeah, it wasn't my life plan, but Man, what a great opportunity to bring this to the students in New Jersey and give them something that I wanted 15 years ago and couldn't have, right? And that means a lot to me.
So let me pivot a question if I can, because I was formerly in the healthcare space for years, and I had the original partnership with now, which is now Rowan SOM, and Rowan has 2 medical schools. Now you have a veterinary school. What will happen from the research component, working together with the aspects of the medical schools and the veterinary schools to improve outcomes for all types of things in medicine?
I think we'll be the second in the country that has a DO, MD, and DVM program.
Right.
Okay.
So having that trio is great. I'll give a lot of credit to the deans of our medical schools too. We'll talk about One Health and the interactions between animal and human health. And sometimes people say, yeah, it sounds great, let's do that. But we have 2 deans of medical schools that are very legitimately interested in partnerships with the vet school. We're talking about ways to expose medical students to what vets do and vets to what medical students do. Or when we go out and do these clinics in Camden, if the med students are doing a flu clinic, we can do a rabies clinic, right? So this is approaching health as a whole and looking at the interactions between humans and animals and how we can improve everyone's quality of life. So I think that's going to be great, on the clinical service side. The research side, we have an entire translational biomedical sciences program now that's under the Virtua umbrella, right? And that Rowan Virtua partnership is going to mean that I have a biomedical engineer and a human orthopedist and a veterinary orthopedist in the same building working on a new orthopedic implant. And that's really phenomenal. A lot of the things that end up in human healthcare are coming out of the things that we've done in human medicine and sometimes vice versa. So I think we're going to make huge strides by getting all those people under one umbrella.
That's going to be great, because I happened to be at one of the dean's offices last week, and he actually had his little bed there for his dog. And I've known this dean for a while, and I says, the dog comes here. He says, yeah, every once in a while, I need some work. I need some reinforcement. So they're all very interested in not only the medical school, but they're excited about the veterinary school.
Right.
To hear them talk about it the same way you've spoken about it. So
you've talked a lot today, about the school. It's still in its infancy. We're one wall up. Every kind of project like this has challenges along the way too, and every leader is faced with challenges. So even though we're still in kind of the early stages here, what are some of the challenges that you faced, or maybe even what are some of the challenges that you anticipate? Not that you could really ever anticipate all the challenges, but
I think I've been working on this project almost 4 to 5 years now. I think it started in 2019 with me. So while we're in our infancy of the building, this has been a really long project. And it's supposed to be, right?
Right.
It's not easy to start a vet school, a medical school, any school, and there's a lot of prep work. So starting from scratch is challenging because you have to anticipate every single thing that you'll need for the rest of this program, and that's been very time consuming. I think for me, coming from the private sector into an state-run academic environment is challenging, right? There's a different set of procedures and a speed at which things operate that was a little bit...
Not rapidly, you mean?
It was a little bit of an adaptation for me being a private sector
I know.
guy.
I just want to say you didn't say not rapidly. I did. Okay.
So, I think that as a whole, though, this university is really supportive of entrepreneurial efforts and doing things in a different way.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And if I wasn't here, they wouldn't have asked me to do this if it wasn't here, I think. Sure. To start with that. I mean, this is the only institution where someone with my skill set probably would have plugged into this role well. And I probably wouldn't be able to do this unless I was here because they allow me to do that. So, I think for us, the challenges are going to be getting construction wrapped up in time to have students in the building. Sure.
Right.
We've got 18 months or so before we're admitting students, in fall of 2025. I think there's going to be challenges with hiring because there's a huge competition out there now for any sort of veterinarian. And we're not making a lot of cardiologists and oncologists. So I have to go and find them from somewhere else in the world to come join us here in Glassboro. So I think we have challenges of just getting the rest of the program together, staffed appropriately, and launched on time. But we have plans for all of that, and so far we're on target. So.
Doctor, where will you find faculty? Will they be full-time? Will they be adjunct, sort of like as it continues to build? What's the plan?
Well, our plan is to have 75% or more of our clinical science or clinical rotations in-house. So we do have outside partnerships. We have a little over 60 external partners right now. Some of them are vet schools. Some of them are private practices. Some of them are a dairy farm because we don't have cows on campus to do preclinical training. So I'm hopeful that most of our specialists and our general practitioners will be in our own hospital. But if I don't find a cardiologist, I have a bunch of friends we've made with outside partners that have a cardiologist that may be able to come and do cardiology lectures or take students on a cardiology rotation. So some of that's a backup plan, knowing that the hiring climate is difficult because I have to find them from somewhere else, which means they have to leave another school or leave another practice and come here. For us, though, I think being right outside of Philly and by the Jersey Shore and not so far from New York, right? This is a pretty desirable area for people. So we've drawn a lot of candidates in, and we've hired from the U.S. My last candidate's coming from New Zealand. So it's been an international search, but a lot of people want to either come back here because they grew up here or they like the area and are happy to move here. So that's really been a helpful draw for us, getting people to join us and jump on board.
We always say that location is one of New Jersey's top tier, anything, recruiting efforts, whether it be bringing students into schools, bringing faculty, bringing business, bringing employees, our relationship to the shore, New York, Philadelphia, quick trip to DC. It's all very attractive. And so that's interesting to hear that your recruiting efforts are mirroring what I know I say a lot in my day job when I'm talking to businesses and folks as well.
I think you don't know how cool it is here until you're here, though, right? And I had that experience in Kansas. You're from New Jersey? Isn't that where they filmed that Jersey Shore show?
Yeah.
I'm like, It's really not how it is here, right? I grew up on a farm in South Jersey. This is a lot different than Newark or Seaside Heights, right? So every place has its pros and cons, but I think Jersey gets a bad rap sometimes. And then I've recruited faculty who've come here and said, I really like it here. I didn't think Jersey was like this. So sometimes we have to really sell our strengths and tell people what we're really like in this state, right? Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Good luck, and thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that chat as much as I did. What was your key takeaway from this discussion? Share it on our social media channels at Simply Dynamic Podcast. Next up, in our Fresh Perspective segment, established leaders and early career professionals will share recommendations on books that provided inspiration and insights for their leadership journeys.
One great book I would love to recommend on this platform is a book by author Blythe McGarvey. The title is The FISO Factor, Fit In, Stand Out. Somewhat groundbreaking in my career in the sense that it helped me understand the importance of integrating a team, fitting in order to eventually transform a team, standing out.
In my own leadership journey, the book Atomic Habits by James Clear was a very inspirational book. This book is really phenomenal because it honestly teaches you how to analyze your own behavior from a very foundational step to ultimately maximize your productivity and potential through taking small little changes that improve you by 1% every day.
One book that I have been highly recommending recently is The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Ryan is best known for his Daily Stoic podcast and YouTube channel, where he shares many different philosophies shared by the Stoics throughout the ancient world. In The Obstacle is the Way, the author outlines historical figures and how they were confronted with specific problems. By working through the challenges in front of them, they were actually able to achieve greatness. The reason this resonated with me is that I feel that we're in a time where we are constantly confronted by problems. And if we can teach ourselves to work through these challenges instead of succumbing to them, then we can achieve greatness ourselves. Angelo Pinti, Senior Financial Advisor with Merrill Lynch in Philadelphia, first graduate of the Entrepreneurship Program at Rowan University, and member of the Royer College of Business Alumni Advisory Council.
Aria Shoemaker, Medical Office Assistant, Rowan MBA student.
Frank Gerard, Director of Project Management at NFI Industries, Rowan University MBA Fellow.
In each episode of the Simply Dynamic podcast, we like to close out with an action-oriented tip from an expert that you can implement in your workplace. Today's expert advice comes from Christine Miles. Christine is the founder and CEO of EQuipt, a woman-owned training, consulting, and product company, and she is also the developer of the Listening Path.
I believe that listening is the most powerful form of communication, not telling, talking, and knowing, as we are taught through all of our scholastic years. We are taught to tell, talk, and know, and then when we enter the workplace and enter life, we are not prepared to know how to listen. So the problem with that is that it's costing us dearly. So I always ask people to ask themselves, what is it costing you not to listen? This is more like death by 1,000 cuts than it is a gaping wound. So we are injuring each other in our work and our home life every day by not listening without even knowing it. So we need to solve that problem. The first tip is to really know that that is a problem we all have and a problem that we need to solve. The second is to know what to do about it. And that's really where the world has fallen short. So we need to give people the tools and the skills so that they can listen differently. As I like to say, listen to understand. So we call that the listening path, the path to understanding. The analogy is you wouldn't go hiking in the woods without any tools or supplies in your backpack. That would be crazy. Yet we go into the conversational woods every day without those tools, and this is why we are hurting each other and why we are in an empathy crisis that we all experience even more so now since we lived through the pandemic. So we need to fix that. Well, how do you fix that? You need the tools in your backpack. So on the path to understanding, there's really 3 steps to learning to listen, to understand. The first is you really need to know how to get the story, collect the story, gather the story from the person that you're listening to. And there's some tools to do that. You need a map. You need to know the path to the person that you're listening to understanding, which is just like when you're a journalist, you're listening to a story. When you're listening, you're always listening to a story. So you need to have that map. You need to know what you need to gather. You need the tools to stay on the main path. When you're in a conversation, there are a lot of side trails. There are a lot of different ways that you can go and get lost in the woods. So you need to know not only the path and what you're getting, you need to know the stops, and you need to know how to stay on that main path. You need a compass, and there's 6 questions on the compass that keep you on the main path to the story, and I'll just give you a couple of them. 2 that are really powerful are take me back to the beginning. When you start to add that to your dialogue and your listening, you will get more of the story. And when you ask, how does that make you feel, or it sounds like you feel, both a situational question and a feeling question. And then what you need to know about listening is it's not just a one-way endeavor. The second step is that you really need to make sure you affirm that you understand. And I always like to say nothing makes me feel less understood than when someone tells me I understand. So lose those words and instead show that you understand. The most powerful story you can tell someone is their own. So shine a light, get out your flashlight, as we say. Shine a light on the story that you just heard, telling the speaker the story they just told you in 30 to 90 seconds, and you are well on your way to understanding. And last but not least, make sure you affirm that understanding. By doing that, you really say to the speaker, I care enough to make sure that you actually feel understood than me telling you I understand. And how you do that is you say just a few simple words. Do I get you? So once you summarize that story, shine a light, ask them, do I get you? When you follow this path to understanding, you really transform not only the conversation, but the relationship. And when you change the relationship, you get more done at work, you get more out of your employees, you get more out of your loved ones, and you build trust in a different way. Christine Miles, CEO and founder of EQuipt, creator of The Listening Path, member of the Executive Advisory Council here at the Roar College of Business.
Thank you to all of our guests for joining us today, and thank you, our audience, for listening to the Simply Dynamic podcast. This podcast is a collaborative project led by the Graduate Studies team at Rowan University's Roar College of Business in partnership with our hosts, Joe Devine and Christina Renna, and with support from producer and creative director Keith Brand, a professor in Rowan's radio, television, and film department. Music from this episode came from Epidemic Sound and Renku Corporation. Recorded in partnership with Kendrick & Company. To learn more about the Simply Dynamic podcast, visit simplydynamicpodcast.com. Until the next episode, take care, and we look forward to connecting with you again soon.